Chapter 31. A Reasonable Man. Returning back outside the building, Ronin and the assault team were immediately informed of the battle against the unknown force. "The guys who jumped us are pretty much only using ships," a man beside the exit said. "They're also fighting carefully, not allowing us to cause them much damage. We're winning, I think, but it'll take some time for us to beat them." Haxel gave the man a curt nod. With the hammers of fortune being attacked from behind, ambushed without knowing what was going on, it had caused quite the disruption. It had also not helped that it had happened at the worst possible moment, right as they were assaulting Spectre's lair. "At least we seem to be winning," Ronin thought in relief. Damnation! The company's wing commander cursed over the intercom. "Another ship slipped away. It's almost as if they're intentionally stalling us." "I'm at ground level, and I've entered one of the downed enemy ships," a female voice broke in. "Hang on," she continued. "I'm inside the cockpit now. There's an insignia here. I'll share what I see." There was a brief pause as Ronin and the others received a video file. "I recognize that insignia. Wait, we've been fighting executive actions?" The wing commander guffawed. "They're still in business?" Laughter could be heard over the intercom before he continued, his voice now clearly more confident. "No wonder they were behaving so cowardly. Let's throw everything we have at these buffoons." Ronin looked over at Haxel. "Have you met those guys before?" Haxel flashed a grin. "Nope, but we know of them. Executive Actions are a mercenary company known for fleeing the battlefield. Very few even hire them anymore. The wing commander must have held back our forces in fear of another ambush or a scheme of some sort. But if it's those guys, however—" The black-clothed man chuckled before shaking his head. "It's more likely they've accepted a bad contract and are now just stalling. They're probably just trying to drag out the battle so as to salvage what little reputation they have left. Anyways, you coming along?" Ronin nodded, then followed Haxel's group as they headed back towards the tunnel. As they walked, they passed by crumbled buildings and crash sites. Some of those crash sites belonged to ships from the Hammers of Fortune, and through the viewports of those ships, Ronin spotted people, their bodies still and their eyes lifeless. Haxel and the rest of the group noticed the bodies as well, and the moment they did, the usually jovial air around them vanished. Ronin felt something too, but he bit it back down before it could surface. Now was not the time for this. Eventually, they passed back through the tunnel, arriving at the initial landing site before the attack on Spectre. Haxel's group moved on to deal with executive actions, but Ronin didn't follow them this time. Executive actions weren't the real enemy, Argus was. He had to get to that bastard before he could escape. Walking up to one of the few remaining transport ships still parked, he gave the outer hull a couple of hard knocks. "What?" the pilot mouthed through the viewport, his arms spread wide in frustration. Ronin made a gesture for him to open up the cargo door, then knocked on the hull again. It seemed the man understood. He pressed a button, hydraulics began to move, and the door opened up. "What is it?" the pilot shouted as Ronin entered the ship. "These crates should have been 2 kilometers from here by now, where the battle is." "The weapon crates will have to wait," Ronin said. "Take me to Argus's compound." The pilot looked at him in confusion. "You want to go in there alone? That compound is heavily fortified. We'll be shot down long before we reach it." "You don't have to drop me off right on top of the base. Just take me in as close as you can." The pilot grumbled for a moment before heading back into the cockpit. "How are you planning to get out of the ship? You know we can't land, right?" he asked, as the cargo bay door began to rise. "It's fine. I'll jump." "What?" A couple of minutes later, and Ronin was currently flying through the air. A few hundred meters away, the laser turrets atop Argus's compound had begun shooting at the transport ship, so now had been as good a time as any to jump out. Aiming his fall towards one of the taller roofs, this drop should be perfectly survivable. As he was halfway towards the landing zone, however, there was another bright flash of light from the compound. A hot red beam next tore through his energy shield, and his suit's left arm began to melt. "Shit," Ronin cursed. He landed in a roll, the big armor tumbling into a concrete guardrail at the edge of the roof. He needed to move. The 30 centimeters wide composite mass of the guardrail was far from enough to stop these turrets. He crawled out of the way as another red-hot beam tore through the concrete. If he wanted to start launching attacks of his own, he needed to get down from the building first. He made his way over to the other side of the roof, then glanced down. The windows along the nearby buildings were covered by iron rebar. Bolted into the walls, the metal rods bent out around the glass. "Yes," Ronin thought. "This will do." He walked back a little, then with speed, jumped over the guardrail as he fell towards the iron rebar at the other side of the alley. His metal feet touched the iron rods, and he kicked off immediately, aiming the suit towards a window further down. The 1-ton heavy power armor tore the rebar from the wall as he kicked, but it had done its work. From window to window he continued down, eventually slamming into the ground amidst torn-out blocks of concrete and iron. Now for the compound. Ronin circled around the building as guards shouted orders and monowheels hummed. "Apocalypse," he whispered, activating presenceless. The war suit was a loud machine, but with hundreds of men around, every little thing he could do to hide helped. Ronin finally stopped beside a building with a clear view of the facility. He wouldn't get a better chance than this. Activating the target lock, he began to fire missiles. One missile exploded against the first fence. Another was diverted by the second fence, but the rest hit. 2 struck ships attempting to leave. 3 struck the landing pads. 1 hit a laser turret, whereas 4 blew apart the area surrounding the compound's front door. His final knee-mounted scatter missile struck a number of the parked monowheels. Ronin's mouth curved into a malicious grin. Argus would have a hard time escaping now. As pandemonium was unleashed all around him, he did a quick inspection of the suit's HUD. He only had the ion plasma blaster, and 1 rapid-fire laser left now. The suit was also down to its last 34% of battery life. "Now for the hard part," Ronin grumbled. He would have to stall all of these people until the hammers of fortune arrived. He wouldn't be able to hide either. Presenceless might help, but the war suit was too noisy. Ronin saw guards begin to organize around the compound as more men emerged from the foggy alleyways. Some rode over on monowheels. Others came out from the nearby buildings. All of them after him. Turns out, people got a little antsy when you launched missiles at them. As men began to point and shout, Ronin headed deeper into the slums. Opting for one of the several abandoned alleyways, he ran in amidst a hodgepodge of broken sheds, tents, and loose trash, his every step producing a loud, audible clang. Argus's men followed, and the one-wheeled bikes were the first to catch up. Shield stability at 34%. What little energy the shield had recovered began to deplete as 2 riders pulled up alongside him, then began to fire. Ronin fired back with his own laser, putting down one man and scaring off the other. With the surrounding buildings to provide cover, the rapid-fire weapon worked wonders here. This chase wouldn't be ending anytime soon. It would, however, end. And as more and more guards began to pop up around him, Ronin was forced to begin mixing it up. He started by running into the alleyways at random, making sure to act as unpredictably as possible when he picked a path. It still wasn't enough, though. There were hundreds of men here. And as the minutes went by, Ronin started to find guards waiting around for him at every corner. Seems I'll have to get more creative, he thought. Mid-alley, he made an abrupt stop, turned on his heels, then bulldozed his way through a nearby door. If these guys watched every corner, why not just skip those corners entirely? As he broke into the building, he quickly scanned his surroundings. This place was some sort of a drug den by the looks of it. Several men and women screamed as they saw him, and as he moved, chaos followed. Guards began to enter in behind him, and people fled to the side. Tables toppled over as laser fire was exchanged and white powder scattered into the air. Ronin picked up the scent of Fantasia dust. Yeah, this is definitely a drug den. Being inside of a 3 meters tall war suit, he was forced to run around in a bent-over position as he fought. He probably looked ridiculous. Halfway crouched, bent over like a kyphotic hunchback, he bumbled his way from room to room, eventually reaching the other end of the building. He shoulder-crashed the door, and its hinges snapped as the thing slammed onto the streets. Ronin, now covered in white powder, awkwardly stumbled out. Even here there were guards. Well, these two guys had probably just gotten lucky, or unlucky depending on how you looked at it. Not that it mattered much to him. He was faster. 2 laser beams to the head was all it took, and the men went down. The cat and mouse game continued, and the guards attempted several times to set up a blockade. But with how randomly Ronin moved, as well as how often his pot shots hit their targets, they never managed to stop him. What truly made this dangerous, though, was the suit's power supply. He only had 4% left now. All it would take to bottom it out were a couple of shots to his energy shield. An explosion went off nearby, and Ronin saw an entire building crumble to the ground in dust. He looked up. Starfighters. Flying in from above, several ships began to rain down fire, carpet-bombing the entire area. Every single ship wore a similar logo of a hammer, smashing open a golden chest. The hammers of fortune had arrived. Shockwaves boomed across the battlefield, and the fog lit up in bright yellow flashes of light. More buildings collapsed. Amidst the destruction, Ronin spotted numerous dark silhouettes emerge out of the fog. At least 100 strong, they moved in 5-man teams, spreading smoothly across the battlefield as they circumvented the forming rubble. Flowing with perfect coordination as they moved, the men went from door to door, clearing out the few buildings left standing. "Tin Can! Hey, Tin Can, over here!" One of those dark silhouettes shouted out over the chaos. Ronin turned, spotting a figure waving at him amidst the black-clothed men. "I see you've decided to come early. Nice of you to leave some for the rest of us." The figure continued, his voice not lowering at all. "Haxel! You're at the front lines again?" Ronin roared back. "No rest for the wicked, Tin Can! No rest for the wicked!" Ronin made his way over. "Couldn't let Argus escape," he breathed out. He then looked over the battlefield, gathering himself for a moment. "I knew they had shuttles here ready to go. Didn't want to chance him running off while you guys dealt with executive actions." "Yeah, I get that. Those guys came out of nowhere. You guys weren't holding back on the intel you gave us, right?" Haxel asked. Ronin shook his head. "No way. Payment is not an issue for our company. We'd never do something like that. Heart of hearts, we were as clueless as you about these guys. Uh-huh. Haxel clearly did not look convinced. While the two of them talked, it did not take long before the area was cleared. Only Argus's compound was left now. Ronin chose to hang back this time, watching as the hammers breached the compound, then began clearing it floor by floor. He did not have to wait for long. "All right, contractor," the leader of the hammers said, sounding amused. "We're going to need your eyes on this. We've got a bit of a situation here which might be of interest to you guys." Why would Dravenik call me over? Ronin wondered. Could they have found something? If so, what? He made his way into the building, then up the stairs. As he entered Argus's room, however, he was met by something he'd never imagined he'd see, even in his wildest dreams. Argus, a shadow of his former self, was currently on his knees, loudly begging for his life. "I have information," the man cried. "Crucial information about Spectre. Just please spare my life." "Thought you'd want to see this," Captain Dravenik said to Ronin, his lips curving into a slight smile. Behind his face guard, Ronin couldn't help but do the same. "Ooh, I do. I do indeed." Walking over to the blond, muscular man, Ronin said, "I killed that man myself less than half an hour ago. What use could your information possibly have now?" "Whomever you've killed," Argus began, "I doubt it's Spectre. That's why I'm saying I have valuable information." Ronin gave the man a skeptical look, but inside he was trembling. It had felt a little easy, hadn't it? Why would Spectre, a man infamous for being something akin to a ghost, not have fled? Why had he just sat there, waiting for them while his base was conquered? It didn't make sense. "All right, Argus, you'll have to excuse me, but I'm going to need a little more information first if I am to spare you. Considering what you've done, I'm sure you'll understand. Right?" Yes, I understand," Argus said, seemingly saying whatever he could to survive. At Ronin's request, the hammers brought out a projector. He promptly used his Uninet 2000 to upload parts of what he'd recorded today, and a hologram began playing in the room. At first it was difficult to make out what was happening in the recording. Everything was simply too dark. Slowly, however, a figure began to emerge. "No, that's not Spectre," Argus said. "That's Isamelos. He's the one in charge of internal supply." Internal supply? Ronin felt a shiver run through him as he thought about the possible implications behind those two words. Yes, he mainly dealt with the people being supplied to the boss. Supplied to the boss, huh? Ronin furrowed his brows. There had to have been thousands of corpses in that room. Screw it, he thought. If there was even a hint of a possibility that the ghost butcher was still around, he needed to know. "All right, Argus, you have yourself a deal. Now, start talking." Time passed as Argus began laying out anything from Spectre's rise, his connections, to even his speech patterns and general cadence as a person. The ghost butcher's appearance was supposedly that of a short, stout figure with white hair. His young looks, however, did not at all match with the way he talked. Argus kept on emphasizing that point. Spectre didn't sound human. The way he thought and reasoned was completely different from anything he'd ever encountered. It was impossible to guess what was on his mind at any given time. Argus went on and on about it. Eventually, Argus began repeating himself so much that Ronin had to cut him off. "All right, say no more. I think we've gone over everything at this point." Does that mean you'll really spare my life?" Argus asked. Yes, but first, Ronin swept his gaze over the hammers. Based on Argus's description, have any of you seen this man? I've already checked with most of our forces. Assuming our blondie boy is not lying, Spectre either escaped or got blown to bits by one of our missiles, replied Dravenik. Ronin let out a sigh. All right. Everyone here, leave the room. I want some alone time with this guy. Like the professionals they were, the mercenaries quickly exited, leaving Ronin alone to finish his business. Fear began to dawn on Argus's face. What are you? Shut it. Ronin cut him off as he began to exit his armor. Do you remember me? You must have seen my image, right? He asked. As gears and servos worked, the face guard lifted, and Ronin's face became visible. Wait, you're the brat, I mean Ronin, Argus stammered. Ronin next stepped out of the warsuit. I said I'd spare your life, and I aim to keep that promise. As for what shape you will be in once you leave this room, however, he cracked his knuckles as he approached. That will depend on how well you fight. Argus seemed confused as he stared at the youth. Was this kid really going to fight him with his own bare hands? Rise up, Argus, rise up. It's time to fight for your body. It's time to fight for your health. 30 minutes later, and Argus was currently laying down on the floor, his body showing severe signs of being beaten. To Ronin's surprise, the man had been incredibly strong. After reaching the 11th stance in the Calvrakian embrace, Ronin's strength had already far surpassed what was possible for baseline humans. In spite of that, though, Argus had actually somewhat managed to keep up with him in the beginning. Now, you don't blame me, do you? He asked, squatting down beside the beaten man. Argus's swollen face squinted up at Ronin's in indignation. Listen, you've ordered my death on multiple occasions. I spent a month on Exodon where I had to fight for my life. More than once, by the way. Because of you. Put yourself in my shoes. What would you have done if I did something like that to you? Argus didn't answer, but Ronin already had the answer he was looking for. Would you have spared my life? I think not. You're not crippled in any way. You're alive. You're not even in prison. I'm a reasonable man if you think about it. If anything, I'm the most reasonable man in this city. What do you want? Argus croaked out. Well, how about this? If you call off that bounty you've placed on my head right now, I'll let you go. This grudge was between me and Spectre to begin with. With great effort, Argus made the calls needed, lisped out the required words, then canceled the bounty.